Bills 35, Patriots 31. Starting with the Buffalo Bills here, Next Gen Stats notes that the Bills' win probability was as low as 8.9% at one point in their 35-31 comeback win over the New England Patriots to stay in the hunt for the AFC East. And, oh, man, I mean, it did not look good for the Bills in the first half of this game. They went down quick. They were in a hole. TreVeyon Henderson was ripping off explosive runs. Drake May was ripping off explosive runs. And yet Josh Allen really let it rip in the second half. I mean, James Cook was doing his thing throughout the course of the game, but Allen couldn't get anything going in the first half of the game. In the second half, he was really able to let it rip, particularly to the tight ends, who we'll talk about in just a moment. So very impressive moment from Josh Allen. And I think, you know, I don't know that he's going to win MVP back-to-back because Matthew Stafford and the Rams won today. Obviously, they're going to the postseason. They're the first team to clinch a postseason berth. But he at least gets himself into the conversation if he can come back and win this AFC East title from Drake May and the boys over there.
Yeah, it was kind of odd at the start of the game because it was 3 drives ending with a punt, and honestly a bizarre decision from Sean McDermott to punt when they were at the, I think it was like New England 40 or 41. But then afterwards, and Hayden Winks from Underdog, he posted this, after those 3 punts, it was 7 plays and a touchdown, 6 plays and a touchdown, essentially 5 straight touchdown drives after that early sequence from the Bills. And I can understand the case for Josh Allen from an MVP standpoint now, seeing that he has the comeback win last week against some team, don't know who that was, but now this week seeing the same thing again, where we're not seeing the level of, I would say, help from a pass game standpoint from his pass catching core, where we're still getting these like 3 or 4 or 5 targets to Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman really showing up as a 0 from the wide receiver 2 standpoint. And it really is just the production to the tight ends and maybe and also a little bit of work from James Cook that's kind of cementing how this offense continues to claw itself back into games. So, and all that comes back to Josh Allen. And so seeing how well he's been able to play so far, especially over these past 2 weeks, but ultimately over the course of the entire season, it really kind of hones in on how well this Bills offense has been playing. And of course, I mean, the path for them to really be a force if they wind up getting into the postseason for sure.
Yeah, this passing game is just a complete rotation now among the pass catchers. I mean, Khalil Shakir leads the way with 79% route participation, 27 routes here in this one. Keon Coleman is second at 55.9% and doesn't even get a target in this game. Gabe Davis, obviously not heard from. Brandon Cooks runs 14 routes, does not catch a pass. You know, Josh Palmer runs 16 routes, gets 2 targets, catches 1 of them. It really is obviously Khalil Shakir doing everything that we are, you know, familiar with him doing as that short area slot receiver. But it is really the tight ends at this point stepping up. You've got Dawson Knox here with 3 for 37 and 2 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid, 3 for 34 as well. Jackson Hawes chips in with 1 catch for 9 yards. And we'll see, you know, if they can continue to get away with this on offense. But man, I love what they've got going in this tight end room right now. I do think there's some sustainability here. Dalton Kincaid is making plays down the field, and Dawson Knox has emerged as a real big-time weapon around the scoring area. So, Chris, I think, you know, if you're in a tough spot, Dawson Knox obviously maybe is a nice punt play at tight end based on what he's been doing the last few weeks, and Dalton Kincaid has been very efficient all throughout the course of the season.
See, and I was almost wondering why they didn't try and make this their offensive identity after they drafted Dalton Kincaid, in terms of let's make this a more power run, 2 tight end type of offense where you see Kincaid and Knox essentially splitting the usage. I mean, both of them ran around 45-50% of the routes, also 4 targets apiece. So if you have these types of guys that, from Kincaid's standpoint, more of that receiving tight end, Knox can play somewhat in line and can be your, you know, blocker plus, like he has that receiving ability as well. But then you have a Khalil Shakir, then maybe you have a guy that plays some of that sacrificial X type of work, so to kind of draw defensive attention away. This could have been their identity all along, but trying to, I don't know, figure out what their rotation is going to be at wide receiver has kind of painted him into this corner. So I agree with you that this couldn't be their identity, and there's some sustainability to moving forward. I just hope that maybe next season and years moving forward, this is something that they really try and stick to in terms of saying, oh, well, we'll draft this wide receiver Keon Coleman with an early round pick, or we'll try and get these other free agents that you might be interested in that have had some buzz in the past, or whether it's the Josh Palmer's of the world or whatever. Let's stick to this because clearly this is working for them. It works for Josh Allen. And then afterwards, I guess, especially from a selfish fantasy portion or from a selfish fantasy perspective, it becomes easier for us trying to figure out week in and week out, okay, where are these targets going to go? What can we expect from this offense? And I think seems to be the working formula for the Bills.
On the other side of the field here, the New England Patriots, really, again, I think they let this one slip because they couldn't get the downfield passing game going, because otherwise they ran on this Bills team. I mean, even Ramondre Stevenson, 8.3 yards per carry. Drake May, 10.8 yards per carry. And it was TreVeyon Henderson with 2 50-plus yard rushing touchdowns. He now has 4 50-plus yard rushing touchdowns this season. Just incredible stuff. 14 games into his rookie season, he is up there with like Saquon Barkley and Chris Johnson in terms of most career games with multiple 50-plus rushing touchdowns, because he obviously did it in the Bucs win early on this year. So congratulations if you had TreVeyon Henderson and you played him in fantasy. He had 14 carries, but he averaged over 10 yards a carry, including those 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, and so you could almost look at the Patriots offense and see some of the similarities between how those two are structured. Mm-hmm. You've got your tall, mobile quarterback that can do things both through the air and on the ground. You have a solid running game, whether it's swapping James Cook for TreVeyon Henderson. I mean, there was similar, even from a pass catching standpoint. You have a bunch of guys that are more or less your part-time players. Even Stephon Diggs in this one, around 15 routes. I mean, around 50% of the routes for this team. And you have your deep threat in Kayshon Boutte and Mac Hollins also pitching in as well, but not an established wide receiver one, that go-getter or the guy that can essentially, if the team needs a bucket, that's where Drake May is going to go with the ball. They don't really have that yet. And so that's where you could see some of the pitfalls of the Patriots offense once they got into third down, obvious passing situations, because it was Josh Allen with his through the passes to Khalil Shakir or even the tight ends, 7 attempts in obvious passing situations, 6 completions and 4 first downs. And he also ran for a few himself. Whereas for Drake May, didn't have the same level of mobility, even though that's a tool that he has in his tool bag, but also having to throw to, again, Mac Hollins, Kayshon Boutte, some of those other guys, not able to come up with those same big plays to keep the Patriots offense out on the field. So I think that at least at this point in his career, or like where the Patriots offense stands at right now, it becomes tougher for us to try and start each of those guys on a week in, week out basis. That I just want to trust maybe Drake May, TreVeyon Henderson, and outside of that, without the usage, I can't see myself trying to start any of these guys moving forward.
Yeah, I've said it all year. It's really been tough to guess the Diggs game. I thought this might be a moment when he'd get a bump in playing time coming off a bye, big, important game, and it did not happen here. So I agree with Chris. It's just really tough to figure out the distribution of this passing game right now, which means you really can't trust any of these players. And even for TreVeyon Henderson, I say like they ran on this Bills team, I believe his second, the 65-yard rushing touchdown, he truly ran into the line like there was no hole there, and he completely reversed course. And then him and Drake May running down the field together in order to score that long 65-yard rushing touchdown. So that wasn't even within the phase of the play, but he's a playmaker. He made that play, so shout out to him. Next game up here, Rams 41, Lions 34. On the Rams side of this, man, it was an electric offensive performance. I mean, this game lived up to the bill here. This was, I believe, the highest over-under of the entire season. We soared way past the projected point total of 55 here. For the Rams side of it, both running backs, this is a point you've been making for a while, Chris, that you can play both of these guys. Both Kyren Williams and Blake Corum cleared 70 yards on the ground. They split 3 touchdowns between them. Kyren Williams had 2, Blake Corum had 1, and the passing game did what they did. Obviously, there was one early interception for Matthew Stafford to Aiden Hutchinson, but after that, it was pretty much they got whatever they want, including 2 touchdowns to Colby Parkinson.
Yeah, both Rams running backs with a plus 70% rushing success rate in this game. I mean, everything was there for both of them from a rushing standpoint. But of course, it was Kyren Williams getting those short touchdowns like earlier in the game, and then Blake Corum either ripping off a long run here and there. I think he had a long run around 20, 25 yards. And of course, he gets the score too. So this is complementary football, at least from an offensive standpoint, where you have Matthew Stafford, who has been dealing to both of his primary wide receivers. We'll get to those injuries here in just a second. But really, for me, that focus has been on how well this backfield has been operating from an efficiency standpoint. And I'd almost try and look at them. I don't know if I can tempt it again, because the Rams, I mean, they do have, I'd say, a little bit tougher of an out next week going up against the Seahawks. So they have another divisional matchup there. But still, I mean, with how well this offense has been designed, and if you are looking for at least a little bit of help at the RB2 position, Kyren Williams for sure, but Blake Corum as a flex option, I still kind of dig it for sure.
In the passing game, Colby Parkinson, I mentioned he scored 2 touchdowns. He also led the team with 30 routes. Now, there were injuries at the wide receiver position, but that does just kind of put into clear context that he is the number 1 tight end on this team, although Terrence Ferguson, the rookie tight end, was only 1 route away from him. I just think that Parkinson is the more trusted player right now. On those wide receiver injuries, Puka Nacua, I believe, had some cramps at one point, so he was in and out of the game, but he came back in, finished fine. He had 181 yards on 9 catches, 11 targets to lead the team there. Devontae Adams, a little bit more problematic. He had 71 yards in this game on 9 targets. However, McVay said after the game, Devontae Adams, who looked like he pulled up with a hamstring injury at one point, remember he was dealing with the hamstring injury coming into this game, said, quote, "It didn't look good," and the wide receiver status for Thursday Night Football against the Seahawks is in doubt. McVay did say, I certainly wouldn't rule him out yet, but he did come off a little pessimistic about the injury and Adams' potential availability on a short week here.
Yeah, and that one looked bad watching it live, because you could just see Adams pull up lame about 2/3 of the way through the route, and the ball wound up sailing maybe an extra 5 to 10 yards down the field. So I would be, especially on the short week, I would be somewhat surprised if he's available, but it's at least good to see that Puka Nacua was able to come back, because in the moment, that one also almost looked worse with him laying there on the field. But then they saw the reports of him walking under his own power in the tunnel. Then we get the report of cramps later on during the live broadcast, and he comes back. So let's assume that Devontae Adams doesn't make it back. I mean, Tutu Atwell, outside of the tight ends, Tutu Atwell, he had a nice snag down the right sideline for a first down. A couple other catches there too. So I would say that if you are in a pinch, he wouldn't be my first option, but with how well Matthew Stafford has been playing and also the receivers that have been attached to him, if you want to throw a Hail Mary dart throw, I think Tutu Atwell is at least viable, I would say, for week 16.
Lions side of things here, their defense is so banged up right now that I think they're going to be in a lot of these potential high-flying affairs here. And although week 16 they do play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and week 17 they play the Minnesota Vikings, so maybe I want to walk that back just a little bit. We'll see. We'll see if those offenses can actually participate in a high-flying affair. But we know that their offense can do that, and they absolutely did it in this one. They didn't win this game. The running game was non-existent. If we had done our bus segment of the week, we usually take those from the early games. I think if we had accumulated all the games here, we probably would have mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs' name in there, but we'll come back to that in just a second. Man, Jared Goff lightened it up to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams here. He had, I think I saw a Next Gen Stats note, he had 229 passing yards just on in-breaking routes alone in this game. And it felt like it, man. Constantly crossers, digs. And again, it's not just to St. Brown, who was incredibly productive in this game, but it was also to Jameson Williams, who has been really heavily involved ever since. Again, you can either chalk it up to Dan Campbell took the play calling over. You can also chalk it up to Sam Laporta got hurt, or you could chalk it up to both, because that happened essentially in the same week here. But one way or another, Jameson Williams has been a guy that really hurt you in the first half of the season to one of the guys you really, really want here as the season begins to come to a close.
And honestly, as I was watching the Rams game against the Panthers a couple of weeks ago and seeing it was a Jalen Coker, the speedy wide receiver for the Panthers that just smoked Emmanuel Forbes for a deep touchdown, I was almost thinking for this specific game, I think Jameson Williams is going to dunk on this dude. I can already see this happening. And that's exactly what happened here. It's that same archetype of receiver where if you have the speed to get past their first line of defense, this is the type of performance that you can get. So while it was the scheme design line, hitting some of the both Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams on those crossing routes. I mean, just having just the athleticism to get by their defenders and beating them for some of those explosive plays. That's what you're seeing here. So I can, honestly, that's probably the biggest weakness to the Rams defense as of right now, because again, trying to keep Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery mostly bottled up in this game is a task in and of itself, but it's just the back end of the defense. If you do have that speed in order to try and test their corners deep, I mean, they can definitely beat them for some long games. And we saw that, if not from Amon-Ra, but definitely from Jameson Williams too.
I'm just not used to seeing a Lions team like this get completely physically outmatched on the line of scrimmage. And that's what's happening. And that's the deal with Jahmyr Gibbs right now. If he doesn't bust a long play, if he doesn't basically make chicken salad out of what, the run game goes nowhere. They do not have a good, efficient, punch you in the mouth run game as they had previously. And some of that is because change in coordinator. Obviously, I think the run game doesn't look as dynamic as it did last year with Ben Johnson. We obviously see what Ben Johnson is doing with the Chicago Bears right now, but it's also mostly just due to personnel changeover along the offensive line and then injuries on top of that. So it's just, I know we're putting this on the screen here from Ian Harditz, our buddy, that it's every other week kind of with Jahmyr Gibbs in terms of he either wins you your week or gives you a normal game. But then there have been a couple of these duds, and this was definitely a dud here. So nothing you can do about it, really, with Jahmyr Gibbs. You're going to absolutely play him next week against the Steelers. And again, maybe he has one of the, if you survive this week, maybe he has a 30, 40-point banger. But it's just where this team is from an offensive line standpoint right now, that this run game is not the set your watch by it unit as it was previously. My last question for you, Chris, on this game. Were you aware that Jameson Williams and Kyren Williams are first cousins? Because I was not aware of this. The Lions Twitter account, I know nobody cares about this, but I find this fascinating. The Lions Twitter account tweeted out, family reunion before the game, and it was a picture of Kyren Williams and Jameson Williams. I was like, what? What? And so I looked it up, and yeah, they're first cousins. Didn't know that.
I did not know that.
That is your random piece of trivia for the day here. I didn't know that. They're very different, who knows, whatever, but they're very different players too. Kyren is this, kind of grinder, not physically overwhelming presence, but he's just a smart player, does everything right. He's not the fastest back in the world, and Jameson Williams might be the fastest receiver in the NFL. I mean, not that you need to be the same athletic presence of your family or anything. You're just cousins, whatever. Again, I'm struggling to compute this information because I was not aware of it.
No, I wasn't aware of that either, and that's crazy trying to think about it now. But yeah, I did not know that. That's cool. I mean, good for them, and they were able to actually do that whole get together or whatever after the game and whatnot. But still, no, I did not know that. Huh.
The Williams family combined for 3 touchdowns in this very high flying affair. So shout out to the Williams cousins.